Talk about the Gospels.
What's your name?
Rachel.
Hey, Rachel.
They're not necessarily eyewitness accounts. They're written in the third person. And the reason why we have the names Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John is thanks to the Catholics putting those labels on there. So I guess I don't understand why you say they are eyewitness accounts.
Why do I think they're eyewitness accounts?
Right.
Because they contain eyewitness data. Like, for example, the Gospel of John, there are 59 eyewitness details in that document called the Gospel of John that could only have been known by an eyewitness or somebody who knew an eyewitness.
Okay, is it possible that someone could have just been writing a story?
Well, then you'd have to discount all the other evidence that doesn't appear to be a story. It appears to be a historical account.
From the Bible, right? The Bible is writing about, like, Mark is the first gospel that was written. And
probably. Some think Matthew may have been written first. Most scholars say Mark was written first.
Okay, so we'll go with the general consensus, I guess. And then they say maybe Matthew and Luke used a lot of Mark. That's why there's a lot of coinciding events. And if you ever read the Gospels horizontally, where you compare each resurrection account, there seems to be a lot of contradictions, and it's not just an eyewitness.
What would those
problem.
contradictions?
The foundation of the New Testament is the Gospels. All of the other epistles are built on that foundation. So how do you destroy the New Testament? Discredit the Gospels. The contradictions in the Gospels is a common argument that is thrown at the New Testament as a way of discrediting the Gospels, but all of the contradictions are solved. But she brings up the Gospel contradictions concerning the resurrection. Let's hear what those contradictions are.
Well, for example, I think in Mark, the ladies go to the tomb and Jesus isn't there, and an angel tells them to go tell the people, but they don't. It just ends. And then something else is added on about snakes. And then Matthew, he goes ballistic and says there's angels and earthquakes and everything at the resurrection. And they tell her to go tell them to go tell the disciples, and they do this time. Luke reins it in a little bit, and he says the stone was already rolled away, and the angel is sitting on the tomb. Or I don't have this exactly correct, but it's the gist. And then John, being the beloved disciple, made himself, or whoever wrote it, made himself get there first before Peter, and I don't know, there's just a lot of contradictions.
How are those contradictory? I don't see them contradictory. I see them complementary because they're written by different people telling their perspectives on. How are they contradictory?
How did Luke miss the earthquakes and the angels? That seems
well,
like a big detail.
If he doesn't report an earthquake, that doesn't mean it didn't happen.
It doesn't mean it did.
No, but it's not a contradiction.
Well,
like, for example, if somebody came into this, some reporter came into this room tonight and said, Frank Turek gave a presentation, that would be true. And if somebody else came into this room and said, Frank Turek spoke and so did Dr. Ben Gates, that would be true as well.
So far, she's described no contradictions within the gospel resurrection story. She just described a little bit of differences, variations. I want to show you what the Bible says. Let's compare the four gospel resurrection account to see if there truly are contradictions. So let's look at the time of day. The time of day, Matthew says at dawn on the first day of the week. Mark, very early on the first day of the week. Luke, very early on the first day of the week. John, early on the first day of the week. So far, the Gospels are all saying they went on the first day of the week. Who went to the tomb? Matthew says Mary Magdalene and the other Mary. Mark records Mary Magdalene, Mary, and Salome. Luke simply records the woman. John, Mary Magdalene. The same people went to the tomb according to the four Gospels. Events that occurred. Matthew records violent earthquake, angel speaks to them, women meet Jesus. Mark records women brought spices, angel speaks to them, women fled tomb but said nothing. Luke records women took spices to the tomb, two angels appear, angel speaks to them, told the disciples what they found. John records that Mary Magdalene ran to get Simon Peter and the other disciples went to the tomb, disciples left, and Jesus appears. So they all went to the tomb. The women went to the tomb. Things happened at the tomb, but they're being told from a different perspective, but they're essentially saying the same thing. Yes, there are minor variations, but they're all essentially saying the same thing. As it relates to the angels, Matthew says one angel came down from heaven whose appearance was like lightning, clothes were white as snow. Mark says young men dressed in white robes. Luke records two men appeared in clothes that gleamed like lightning. John records two angels in white seated where Jesus' body had been laid. Some of them says one angel, some says two, but none of them says no angels appeared. They're all saying the same thing.
How are those contradictory? I don't see them contradictory. I see them complementary because they're written by different people telling their perspectives on. How are they contradictory?
How did Luke miss the earthquakes and the angels? That seems
Well,
like a big detail.
if he doesn't report an earthquake, that doesn't mean it didn't happen.
It doesn't mean it did.
No, but it's not a contradiction.
Well,
Like, for example, if somebody came into this, some reporter came into this room tonight and said, Frank Turek gave a presentation, that would be true. And if somebody else came into this room and said, Frank Turek spoke and so did Dr. Ben Gates, that would be true as well. That would be complementary. That would not be contradictory.
But the fact that there are variations is strong evidence that these are not fabrications, but they are truly eyewitness accounts. This increases the credibility and the veracity of the Gospels. Just because the other authors did mention the earthquake doesn't mean it didn't happen. I love that. If four people saw a car accident and the detective came and interviewed the four people, he has no idea what happened. They can provide their perspective on the car crash. One person may report the color of the car. Another person may report how it crashed, where it crashed. Another person may report the sound, the speed, people that were injured. Another person may say it was daytime, it was nighttime. The car had silver rims, alloy. They're going to report different things, but they're all going to say the car crashed. They're all going to report that. And the detective can piece together that information to create a picture of what actually happened based on those four slightly different, but ultimately congruent eyewitness accounts. And that's what we have in the Gospels. Four perspectives, four accounts, different yet essentially the same in the key, most important elements, that Jesus Christ was raised from the dead. They all report that. So we can believe the Gospels, and Frank Turek did a great job reiterating that and explaining to her that the differences actually prove it happened. It doesn't prove that it didn't happen. The validity of the Gospels is not a debate. If you enjoyed this video and you want more content like this, do me a favor and subscribe to the channel. Like this video. I'll be back next week with another one. This is Pastor Frederick. This is About a Book. Peace.